TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.LIVE, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
p.m. Eastern.
This is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson. We offer the entertainment, sports, weather, traffic, and news that commercial drivers want to hear here on TNCRadio.LIVE. You know, information is so important, and we cover some tough topics on this show. Drug addiction is one of them. It's a plague that's hovered over our nation for many decades. Each year, more Americans die of drug abuse than all of the soldiers who died in Vietnam. Andrew Mann rose above the odds to kick an opiate addiction and share a story, his story, in a book he wrote called Such Unfortunates. In spite of having what seemed to be an ideal life, Andrew turned to drugs and quickly became addicted. His addiction was so severe, he even worked for the DEA and gained access to drugs, which made things even worse. His book talks about how he found the strength to get out of this hell and into recovery. It covers the current opiate epidemic and how Andrew overcame his addiction. He's with us today to talk about his experience and share some hope with listeners who may struggle with drug abuse or have family or friends who do. Welcome, Andrew. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I'm sure everybody has a different story, but it all kind of ends up the same way when they become addicted. Could you tell us your story?
Yes. I grew up in what looked like from the outside was a nice home, but behind closed doors, it was actually a nightmare. I grew up in a very abusive household all around. And that led me to start developing at a young age. I developed anxiety and depression. And through that, I had gone to see doctors because I was having like severe panic attacks where I was actually believing I was having a heart attack. And I went to see a doctor at 13 and was put on an adult dose of Xanax, which, is a very strong, it's called a benzodiazepine, which is a very powerful drug. And that was probably the first drug I ever became addicted to.
Oh, and that's highly addictive, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, but I was a kid. I went to a doctor. They said, take this. And at first it worked. And so I didn't look at it as, oh, I'm getting addicted to something or this could be bad for me or anything like that. I just went, filled the prescription and started taking it. But the doctor and I never really discussed what was going on with me. It was just take this drug and hope for the best, so to speak. So I started taking that and I stayed on that, but eventually the potency wore off, and I started to drink alcohol in high school to excess because the Xanax wasn't cutting it. You know what I mean? It just wasn't filling the anxiety all the time. So I started drinking alcohol to excess in high school, and I experimented with drugs in high school, but nothing too crazy. It wasn't until later on in life that in my early 20s, I had gotten an injury and ended up taking Percocet and then Oxycontin. And when I first took it, it was like the answer to all my prayers. It took away my anxiety, my depression. I felt like normal people sort of felt on the outside. Everything I'd gone through in childhood sort of washed away with that medicine. It really did. It made it feel just, I love the way it made me feel. And, I was getting it from a doctor. It was a prescription. I'm thinking, what could be wrong with this? Sure. And I found out after I'd been taking it for a while and I ran out and I started going through physical withdrawals. And at that point in my life, I had never experienced anything so awful. It was probably like, if I could best describe it, it would be like having the flu times 100. But it just, my whole body, and I didn't know what was going on with me. And I just knew I had to I felt so awful that I had to make it go away. And when I took another Oxycontin and that sort of flu went away, at that point I knew I was addicted to these things. And another problem with that is you build up a tolerance to Oxycontin. So let's say you took 2 a day and that worked. In a couple of weeks, you're going to need 4 a day. And then a couple months, you're going to need 16 a day just to keep you at that same level you were at before. And so
it's a vicious cycle.
Oh, yeah. I was at the point, I was taking, 64 Percocets every day.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And what's the normal dosage for people?
2 or 3 a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when I got to Oxycontin, I was taking 12 to 16, 80 milligrams a day. So you're talking about the equivalent of around 140 to 200 Percocets every day.
And you were still able to function?
I was, and that is one of the things that I sort of misconceptions that are really out there. Now, if I had gone just one day and I'd never taken them before and I took that many, I would probably be in a coma. But after you build up that tolerance, it's really, you can take what the same effect you'd get from taking like 1, you get from taking 16. If that makes sense. It's just your body becomes so physically dependent. And the more physically dependent, the worse the withdrawal gets. And so that's when people start spending all their money. And eventually doctors will only write you a certain amount. And that's when people turn to either street drugs or buying from, and that's what I did. I turned to street drugs and buying from illegitimate sources, people off the street, people that were selling their medicine, and until eventually, that even was too expensive. And I just had to go straight to street drugs the whole time, which Oxycontin leads everyone to heroin. And heroin has such a horrible name. But honestly, it's very, it's not too far off from the things you get from a doctor. And so once I got onto that, my life really went out of control. And I was basically a hopeless case. I ended up homeless on the streets of Camden, New Jersey, which is probably one of the worst places in the United States. It was for a while. It was like the murder capital of the United States. And everyone had given up on me. I had given up on myself. And amazingly through a few people that I consider angels that refused to give up on me, I was able to get out of that and completely turn my life around. I went to a treatment center for the last time. I'd been to some other before and they all failed when I went there. But this time it was different. And I ended up staying clean and really got my life together. And that's when I was talking to a friend's mom, a friend who had died from an overdose. And she said to me, "How were you able to get past this? And my son wasn't." And I sat down and I told her my story. And after I got done telling my story, she said, "You need to write a book, because if I would have known what you would have told me now," she said, "I probably would have been able to save my son." And so after she said that to me, it sort of lit a fire under me, and I decided to go out and try to write a book. And I did. And that was, it was tough, but once I got it out there, it's been a great experience. I've heard from so many people that have said to me, "Your book made such a difference in my life." I've heard from people that said they just thought they were lost causes and were going to give up. And one woman wrote to me and she said, "I was going to commit suicide and I read your book and now I actually think I can break free from this." Wow. And hearing that was amazing.
So what was the difference? I mean, you said you'd been in some other rehabilitation facilities and the treatment centers didn't help. What was the difference? Why did this last time that you were in a treatment center, you finally able to kick it?
Okay. What had happened with me was when I had gone to treatment centers before, they would focus on, there were 2 aspects of it. They would just focus on the the first aspect was the time. I was actually able to be in this treatment center a lot longer than normal. But the second was I actually was able to focus on the problem I had before the drugs, what made me go to that, and not just looking at the drug itself. When I had gone to treatment centers before, people would say, okay, we need to get you off this drug. And so I'd go to a detox, we'd get out of it. Taking drugs is bad. You're bad for taking them. And then bam, you're back on the street. But
they'd actually say you were bad?
Well, it's basically, you shouldn't be taking these things. And that was their treatment, but it wasn't, hey, why? Well, don't we look at why you were taking these in the first place? Right. Yeah. Why do you have depression? Why do you have anxiety? What is the common bond I found from almost every person that had let these drugs sort of take them over was that they had a very abusive either childhood or had gone through, some really terrible stuff in their life, and they were hurting inside. And opiates bring a relief from that hurt. And so that was... And once the person goes and say they get the drugs out of their system and they go back on the street, but they haven't worked on that problem inside of them, it's just a matter of time before you'll go back to the drug. And so I actually had to get help for what I was dealing with, what was causing the anxiety and the depression. And I had to admit the abuse I had suffered and seek help for that. And once I did that, there were a few other things that had come in my life that really helped out. But once I did that, I was actually able to heal. And me not wanting drugs 24 hours a day in the back of my head, it started going away. And I had never had that when I left the treatment centers before. All I could think about was using drugs. But this time when I left, it was, I can actually maybe do this and live a normal life. And the further I got away from it, time-wise, the easier it became. And I also started giving back. Like I would go to treatment centers and talk to people. I would go to detoxes and talk to people. And that also helped me because it reminded me of where I was. And I got to see, and just through helping people, helped myself. And, it's been one of my biggest goals is I want to start my own rehab center that helps people and uses the things I've learned that actually work. And the stuff that doesn't work, we put that to the side. So I'm hoping to get funding for that one day and start my own place.
Did you come to this realization yourself, or was the last treatment center the one that gave you this insight so that you were finally able to overcome this terrible addiction?
It was sort of a combination. I did come to a lot of the realizations myself, but the last treatment center did make it, I explain in the book, I also had a few people that, especially one person in particular, refused to give up on me. And she wrote me a letter every day while I was in there telling me, amazing things about myself and how I could beat this. And I had never had anyone that supported me like that. My parents were not very supportive people in any way. And so through this person believing in me, I very little, slowly started to believe in myself. And, it was really amazing of this person. And like I said, I call her an angel in my book because she really was.
I would definitely say so. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's, another reason I wanted to tell what she did for me. And so I put that in the book as well. It's another reason that I wrote the book, too, to honor her in a way.
That's wonderful. And that's, you were so lucky, too, because not everybody has that. And once they get into a treatment center, they don't feel good about themselves at all. And people condemn them, which is the worst thing possible. Yeah.
Yes.
I definitely want to discuss more of this. We're going to be coming to break here. We're talking with Andrew Mann. He's the author of Such Unfortunates, about the opiate addictions and the epidemic that's hit our country and how you can kick it. He's got a vision of hope for people. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE.
This info blog on TNCRadio.LIVE is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. Everything truck drivers need to know about sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is an issue that affects 1 out of 3 truck drivers. Truck drivers who drive tired may be unaware of how much their lack of sleep affects their driving. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration attributes 2.2% of all driving accident fatalities to drowsy driving. While there's not a law in place that requires truck drivers to get testing for sleep apnea, if you suspect you have sleep apnea, stay with us to learn more about sleep apnea and how it can affect truck drivers. What is sleep apnea? Sleep apnea is a potentially serious sleep disorder that causes you to have pauses in your breathing or take shallow breaths during sleep. It's an extremely common issue that affects millions of people in the United States. If you snore loudly during the night or still feel tired after a full night's rest, you might have sleep apnea. According to the Mayo Clinic, the main types of sleep apnea are obstructive sleep apnea, the more common form that occurs when throat muscles relax; central sleep apnea, which occurs when your brain doesn't send proper signals to the muscles that control breathing; complex sleep apnea syndrome, also known as treatment-emergent central sleep apnea, occurs when someone has both obstructive sleep apnea and central sleep apnea. Symptoms of sleep apnea. According to the Sleep Foundation, all 3 types of sleep apnea share certain common symptoms: disrupting breathing, in which a person's respiration can become labored or even stop for up to a minute at a time; excessive daytime sleepiness; morning headaches; irritability; limited attention span, or difficulty thinking clearly. Many of these symptoms arise because of poor sleep and decreased oxygen levels that occur as a result of interrupted breathing. Some additional symptoms are connected to obstructive sleep apnea: snoring, including snoring that's especially loud and involves gasping, choking, or snorting that may cause a person to briefly wake up; morning sore throat or dry mouth; frequent need to wake up to urinate. Causes and treatment options for sleep apnea. Sleep apnea occurs when the airway becomes blocked while sleeping. Here are some common causes of an increase in airway blockage: being overweight, sedative medication, alcohol, family history of sleep apnea, smoking cigarettes, sleeping on your back, nasal congestion. If you suspect you have sleep apnea, reach out to your doctor to get a treatment plan going. Avoiding treating your sleep apnea can result in losing the ability to operate a commercial motor vehicle. Most often, treatment plans will require you to have a CPAP machine in your truck. The CPAP machine helps pump oxygen to you while you sleep. In addition to using the CPAP machine, your doctor may recommend exercising, losing weight, or using different oral appliances that help hold open your airways. As a truck driver, it's crucial to take care of yourself, because trucking is such a difficult and demanding job. At times, it can be challenging to take care of your health. Sleep apnea is a real issue in the trucking industry. We encourage all drivers to be aware of the symptoms and to get help if they suspect they have sleep apnea. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network on app.thetruckersnetwork.net. TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson. I'm speaking with Andrew Mann, the author of the book, Such Unfortunates. It's the story of hope for those who are trying to overcome drug addiction. Oh my gosh, Andrew, you said in our previous segment that you were prescribed Xanax at the age of 13 and kept on that drug for years. It seems like that really, with an undeveloped brain, because children are growing, that sets you up for a life of disaster. Oh my goodness.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that assessment 100%. I do. Not only did it set me up for disaster, but yes, it slows. Xanax is it can erase your memory. It can have a terrible reaction with other chemicals, especially alcohol. It can not only slow the growth of your brain, but it slows the growth of testosterone, growth hormone, a lot of important, I've only learned about this recently, but there's a lot of important things that you need while you're developing.
Sure.
And so for trying to learn under the influence of Xanax is definitely not an ideal situation. And
that had to have increased your anxiety too, because it had to have made things more difficult.
Oh, yeah. And that's exactly what it did. At first, it helped with the anxiety, and then it made everything 10 times worse, because even if I woke up and I said I didn't want to take it, my body was so addictive that I'd go into severe panic from not having it, from the withdrawals of it.
Right. And you had no idea what it was. I mean, you were just a kid.
Right, exactly. And when doctors, there's a few doctors that now that I trust, that know about this stuff, when they hear how long I was on it and when I was put on it, they just, it's like they shake their heads in disbelief. And, it really was, looking back on it, the last thing I should have been doing. It was definitely setting me up for a course of, what ended up happening to me. So, and, you'll read in the book, I went through all the worst things. I've been to jail. I've overdosed and died twice. It's been anything that you could imagine I went through. The fact that I'm still alive today is beyond, that's what most people remark that know me or know my story or have read the book. Just that it's a miracle that I'm alive. So that's one of the reasons I'm trying to get my story out, and I want to help as many people as possible, because I have to believe I'm here to do something good, or I would have passed away already.
Well, and I think that part of what happens with people who are dealing with this type of addiction, they start there's a lot of self-hatred. They hate themselves, and they're getting negative messages from other people. Sure. Gee, this is your fault. What is wrong with you? It's all negativity. And certainly at a young age, you were dealing with abuse. And yes. My question was, did you ever get any kind of counseling along with this Xanax, or any ways to cope? Or you just were put on a pill and told to, go on your merry way?
Yeah, that was basically it. You had to see the doctor for 15 minutes once a month, but, he just asked, how you doing? And I wasn't, I wasn't going to say, so there really wasn't, that wouldn't be counseling. So no, I didn't.
Not at all.
I didn't receive counseling. No.
So then what you developed was a negative self-worth when you think about it.
Absolutely. I did not like being in my own skin. And that's why opiates change that feeling for me.
Right.
And, if you hate being in your own skin and something gives you relief and you're like, oh my God, I actually feel good in my own skin for once. That's why I wanted to stay on that. And, somebody telling me it's illegal or all this, it's just, I'm putting something in my own body, buddy, and it's actually helping me. You're going to tell me it's illegal, or it just didn't make sense to me. I'm like,
well, you were searching for answers at a young age, and just to give perspective for people on how insidious opiates can be. How long was it before, say, from the age of 13 until your life completely spiraled out of control?
Well, to give you an example of spiraling out of control, I was in withdrawal so bad, and I went to the hospital trying to tell them I was in pain so they'd give me painkillers. And they said to me, unless you have a broken bone, don't come back here because we're not giving you painkillers. And I went home and I took a hammer and I broke my hand.
Oh my gosh.
So.
And how old were you at this time?
I guess I was 20 at that time. Yeah.
So this is within 7 years of initially being put on Xanax, which was supposed to help you, which was very irresponsible the way it was handled. Oh my goodness. I mean, wow.
Right. And
so you probably had a lot of anger too.
Yeah, I definitely did not have an easy life by any stretch of the imagination. But I try to, There's kind of a gift in what I've been through, because I appreciate things that other people wouldn't appreciate, if that makes any sense. What I went through was terrible. My childhood was beyond awful. The addiction was, it just doesn't get much worse than that. But now, just having a normal life, I'm so happy not waking up sick, having things like a credit card or a car or a driver's license, or having money in the bank, things that people take for granted every day. For me, it's like I'm so grateful because I was without that stuff for so long. I didn't have things to eat during the day. I didn't have a place to lay my head, and all that mattered was getting more drugs so I wasn't sick. And, when you live that way, when it's been that awful, there is a gift that you get from it, that you do appreciate every little thing in life now. Mm-hmm. And so I try to look at the good things because, I try to keep on that path, and I try to help as many people to not go through what I went through. And that's why I want to spread my story around as much as possible, and hopefully can help some people avoid the same, hell that I went through.
Sure. To find out why somebody takes the drugs. And it just makes so much sense, rather than just treating the symptom. The symptom is the addiction.
Exactly.
They're not really treating the disease, the reason behind it. If somebody has a brain tumor and it's operable, they remove the brain tumor. But if they're not treating that, what led up to this? It makes sense.
Exactly.
And I would imagine that that's a story so many can say. Of course, you do have people who go in who are injured, say in war, or there's a on-the-job injury or something that is chronic, massive pain, and they're prescribed opiates. They become addicted.
Yes.
Because if I'm not mistaken, isn't it true that with opiates, pretty much everybody gets addicted over a period of time?
Physically, if you take them for a certain period of time, you're going to become addicted to it. The more you take it, yes, absolutely. And the withdrawal, I know people that really weren't addicted mentally at first. It was just the physical part. Like it was somebody, like you say, that got into an accident. And if they keep being prescribed this, which a lot of people were because of how much it was being pushed, especially in areas like the coal mining areas and stuff where people tend to have a lot of pain from their employment, or even from truckers that have pain in their back. But when it was pushed on these people, if they get in an accident, they start taking this, they think they're getting it from a doctor. It's got to be fine. And before they know it, they have to take this whether they want to or not, because they can't get out of bed or do anything else, and will be in excruciating, awful pain and sickness unless they take this medicine. And, they'll continue to take it, and whether they want to or not. And if they run out of money, they're going to put it on credit. And you'll see, and people ruin their lives over having to take this just to avoid the sickness. And it's awful.
And I have read that actually being on these types of drugs, it causes nerve damage, and it could actually increase the pain. I mean, it's just a terrible vicious cycle.
Yes, it is. These drugs are really only supposed to be meant for a short-term solution. Mm-hmm. It only came when the profit motive came in and they realized they could get people addicted to it. I mean, sadly, you wouldn't think that would be something that someone was producing a drug for, but when profit came into it, then all of a sudden it became a long-term thing and an extended release, and you can take this on your life. There was this commercial when OxyContin first came out, and there was 11 people on the commercial, and they all said how great this was, and they felt great, and they could go to work. And now 10 years later, they interviewed, and like 9 out of the 11 are dead. One is in jail, and the other one is, I don't think they could even find the person.
Wow.
So, it's just, this was never meant to be something that someone should stay on for the rest of their life. The only people that really or should be on that in that situation are terminal cancer patients.
Right.
If
I'm not mistaken, wasn't oxycodone or Oxycontin marketed as, and doctors thought it was not addictive?
At first, people did come out and say that, but they knew it's impossible. If you were a scientist, it's literally impossible to not know it was addictive. It's the same chemical makeup as heroin. And so they lied. They went in front and they lied to everyone and said it wasn't. And it was a less addictive form that people could take, and the doctors didn't have to worry about it because it was extended release. And as a scientist and educated person, it would be impossible to come to that conclusion, honestly. So they did. They lied. And the pharmacies are paying for that. Some of them are now, but they've made billions of dollars in profit. And it really was a shame. If you've seen all the lives that have been destroyed, people who are in jail now that have lost their businesses, their lives, their children, it really has been a nightmare. And, that's one of the things I hope the treatment centers right now have, like a 3% success ratio. And if they started focusing more on what we're talking about, I'm sure that ratio would go up a lot higher.
Well, yeah, because I would imagine that there are a lot more people in the treatment centers, too, that had issues like you did, anxiety, things that need to be addressed. And if they listen to the people who have had success in the treatment centers, maybe they could change their treatment modality. It would make sense. You
would think. And yes, you're exactly right. Most often, the most common bond that I saw among everyone in there was depression, anxiety, and a terrible abusive childhood was the one common denominator I could find among all addicts. So, it's definitely something that should be looked into, and I can't believe it isn't more often. And so that was one of my goals, to hopefully find funding from somewhere to start one of these places, and hopefully get one in all 50 states that actually helps people. So
yeah. Oh my goodness.
Instead of just temporary fix and then sends them back out.
Here you are. You're clean now. Good luck. Yeah,
right.
That's just not the way to do it.
Right.
Not at all.
We're spending billions of dollars on that.
Sure.
And it's crazy that, but I'm trying. So I'm getting out there. I've been writing people, and I'm trying my hardest to hopefully get somebody to pay attention.
Well, I think that being on shows like this and certainly writing your book, that's getting attention, and people are going to say, he's got some really good points here. Let's talk to him. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show. We're talking with Andrew Mann. He's the author of the book, Such Unfortunates. Wow. He's got a very compelling story and a wonderful story of recovery and hope for those who read this book. This is TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson. Definitely stay tuned for more. We got some more great information from Andrew coming up. Mental health is a topic that isn't addressed enough in the trucking industry. There are many articles, websites, and businesses that can help truck drivers live a healthy lifestyle. But what about mental health? Mental health issues are not uncommon in truck drivers. In fact, trucking poses several risk factors when it comes to mental health issues. Lack of sleep, loneliness, stressful work environment, lack of physical activity. Truck driving can be rewarding, but health issues such as sleep apnea, obesity, diabetes, and depression can result from the strains of the job. So how do drivers prevent these health issues? Stress is an unavoidable part of trucking. Trucking allows you to see beautiful parts of the country, but it also puts you in many stressful situations. Driving in traffic in unfamiliar cities creates stress on a driver. There's stress when you're not sure if you're going to be able to deliver your load on time. You also can become stressed when you're away from home for so long. As you can tell, there are plenty of stress triggers when you drive professionally for a living. One of the best ways to reduce stress is by learning how to handle it. I realize it's easier said than done. It takes time and self-discipline. Here are some examples of ways you can reduce stress as a truck driver. Listen to music or a podcast. Start eating healthy. Exercise or stretch. Talk with family and friends. Get good sleep. Plan your trip out. In addition to managing stress, there are other ways you can keep good mental health while on the road. Drivers often portray the image of being tough. Mental health is not a discussion that many truckers are going to have. Communicating your mental health struggles with friends and family, therapists, or other drivers is a good way to work through your mental health struggles. Here's some more ways you can stay mentally healthy when you're on the road. Stay in touch with loved ones. Establish a morning and night routine. Bring a pet on the road. Travel with your spouse. Consider team driving. Bring things on the road to keep you entertained, like a laptop, video games, or TV. Occasionally book a hotel room. It's nice to get out of your truck every once in a while. Mental health is just as important as physical health. Drivers need to prioritize their mental health and take the necessary steps needed to be mentally healthy. It all starts with communicating with someone you trust, managing stress, and taking time out of the day to do something nice for yourself. For more information on mental health in truck drivers, check out Common Mental Health Issues Truck Drivers Face on the truckersnetwork.net. Thanks for listening.
Enjoy the best in trucker style music and comedy weeknights, starting at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
There won't be a
You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Andrew Mann. We're talking to him about the book he wrote, Such Unfortunates. Tom Kirk's with us too. Andrew is really trying to inspire hope. He's got some really great insight on addiction and opiate addiction. Andrew, what do you think? Where's the biggest problem in the way the opiate addiction is being handled today? I mean, I know that it seems like it's blown up in the past 20 years, but it's always been a problem. How do people find hope?
Well, I think the biggest problem, there's a few biggest problems. One of them is that it's turned into, it's been criminalized, and that has made a very big obstacle for people getting help. A lot of people are either thrown in jail or, they go to extremes to buy, it's kind of had the reverse effect of helping people. Mm-hmm. When you make something criminalized and what they've done with it. And so that is one huge barrier I've seen. And instead of getting somebody that needs help, a suffering person, they're seen as a criminal and an enemy in a drug war, which has been insane because, if you look at anything, the war on drugs has actually produced more addicts and more problems than actually helped. But I think with opiates, it's such a huge thing is the physical addiction that comes along with it. Right. And I think people, for someone to get help from an opiate addiction, they first need a detox, is the first aspect. But instead of them looking at that to be the only aspect, after the detox, they still need to get help for what made them go to that addiction in the first place. And that is where the treatment should be. It should be separated. They should have the detox part, get it out of their system, and then an actual treatment center where they get treatment for what is going on with them behind it before they get back and try to live their lives. Because if you just take the drugs away, the person's still left with what sent them there to the drugs in the first place. And so I think that is one of the biggest obstacles. And a lot of people, there's a lot of misinformation out there that goes around. There are options like methadone and Suboxone out there for people that, if they, what I had first, how I got off the streets was basically got on one of them. I got on methadone and was able to wean off of it. And it was really a godsend for me if used the right way. But there are barriers to those too. Methadone is only available in a clinic, and it's not a doctor can't write it to someone. which is, it's the only medicine in the world that's treated that way.
A doctor can't write the prescription?
Nope.
You said? Really?
Nope. You can only get it from a clinic because apparently a couple of our politicians are owners in over 300 methadone clinics.
Ooh.
And yes. And so if doctors, and they've made millions of dollars doing it. Yes. And so
I have heard some of those clinics, a lot of them are not on the best sides of town. So that discourages people.
Exactly. And methadone, it may not be perfect, but it has about 30% better or 10 times better success ratio than our current rehabs have. And I've known people that have, been on it and stopped taking it because of the only place they could get it from was a clinic. And 2 weeks later, one of them was dead of an overdose of drugs. So having those not available, I think is just leaving this as only to be a doctor can write you fentanyl prescription, which is much more addictive, a much more powerful drug, but they can't write you methadone to help somebody that's going, it's insanity.
I did not know that. That's interesting. And it seems like that would come under antitrust or monopoly or good grief. I mean,
it really is. It's a shame. And it's one of the things out there that needs to be brought up more. And some doctors have got together and took it in front of the politicians and said, we need to be able to give this to people. This could save lives. And, there's always the anti people who say, no, keep the clinics. And it's really a shame. If they want their clinics, fine. But doctors, if somebody really needs it, there should be more access to it. I mean, restricting access to something that could save people's lives is just insane to me. It is.
Right.
So that is one problem that's out there. Suboxone is another option that doctors can prescribe, but the prescriptions get very expensive if you don't have insurance. Methadone's very cheap. Suboxone is very expensive. So but it can be helpful. There's people that get on that and it can change their lives, which
sure.
I am completely not against. If you're, then you can get your life together and you can slowly wean off of it when you're strong enough. And I think those two should be made much more available out there to people suffering from addiction as well.
It would make sense.
It would. Would.
Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, Andrew, I've got a question for you. I have known some people over the years who have struggled with addiction off and on. And one of the things that I have noticed with them is they said I needed to go get counseling, but counseling's too expensive. It's like $80 a session or $100 a session, whatever it is. And when you listen to what they were spending on their drugs, you're going, wait a second, you're going to do this once a week or every other week, and that's too expensive, but you were spending X number of dollars a week on your drugs. So as someone who's never done it, one, I have trouble understanding that. But what can you say to someone who's saying, hey, counseling's too expensive? That might encourage them to get this, because one of the things I've kind of gathered from what you're saying today is that counseling, even when you're back in your normal everyday life, is probably something that's going to benefit a lot of these people.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. I don't think the expense is really, I think a lot of people have a hard time finding it where they live, maybe more than the expense. That's what I've heard around here. I think there are insurances that'll cover it. There's some also groups people can attend, like NA and AA, that can be helpful to them as well. And they can receive counseling through them, either through the group or the people there will recommend a counselor they can see that's even either reasonably priced or they can use their insurance to go through. But I have heard that there is, I guess the biggest complaint I've heard, that it's either a 3 months waiting list to see a counselor or the availability isn't there.
Wow.
And that's why I think with a treatment center, it would need to have the counseling there and be a longer, our treatment centers now are 30 days and out basically, where I think they should be a 6 month. I think that would make a lot more sense, or at least 3 months. because somebody after 30 days of, especially with an opiate addiction, their brain is just not thinking right. They're not able to make the best decisions. They need time for their brain to start thinking like a normal person again, their body to heal, and then they can really accept the counseling. You're not going to do that in 30 days with someone that's had 10 years of straight opiate use. It just won't happen. So I think, if somebody's out there and they're really looking for counseling, I would recommend that they try either NA or AA group. There's also Smart Recovery, which is a new recovery group that has started that isn't really based on the 12 steps. And you could ask the people in there, because a lot of people that are sober in there have gone to counseling and know counselors or have connections to that. Also, a lot of the treatment centers may know counselors that do it on the side as well.
Insurance has a lot of the limitations. Am I correct? I mean, that's one of the big barriers.
Correct.
That's even bigger than Andrew realizes, because in trucking, there is a stigma, a huge stigma against mental health because of liability reasons. So a lot of companies, mental health counseling is not covered under insurance at all.
Wow.
And because there is a perception, and I have seen this over the years, where if you mention to a DOT physician that you've dealt with depression in the past, they automatically assume that means you're suicidal.
Wow.
And the level of ignorance that myself and others have seen, because I myself have had some issues with very mild depression. And if you look at the way one of the questions is raised, I used to mark it down. I was talking to a DOT examiner, says, yeah, you got last treated for what? In college? He goes, yeah, don't put it down anymore. They're only worried about the last 10 years. And what you're describing, we're not even worried about as a DOT examiner. I says, and the problem is you're going to get somebody who hears that and is so worried about being sued if you're ever in an accident that they're going to make you jump through all these hurdles that are not necessary in your situation. And really what it comes down to is that there is a huge mental health stigma in trucking. The other issue that and I believe I'm correct on this, a lot of companies may provide, if you do test positive, a way for you to go through treatment, but it's done at your own expense. And it's not a super cheap program, so you're not working in the meantime. So a lot of drivers are going, how can I afford to pay this? How can I afford the counseling, et cetera, because, it's coming out of my pocket. And at least some of the drivers that I've talked to, the other issue is availability, because if we're out on the road, you can't go to some of these meetings. You can't see a counselor face to face. So there's a lot of challenges for drivers that make it as difficult as it may be for a normal addict. It ramps it up a level or two. And that's not saying that they all aren't serious. They are, but they have additional challenges they have to deal with.
Wow.
Sure. Yes. No, it's sad that there is, but I can absolutely see it. We've progressed in our society, but it's a shame because a lot of people will suffer because of that stigma. And, I wish that there was an easier way around that, and it seems like we spend so much money in this country on stuff that, really doesn't help a lot of people, that we could switch a few funds to going towards stuff that could really actually help people.
And make a difference. Absolutely.
It really could.
Oh, my goodness. Andrew, we could spend hours on this topic because it's just, wow. Yeah. You've got a wonderful book here and a message. How do people reach you? How do they find your book? We've got about 2.5 minutes, and I definitely want people to be able to reach out and get your book.
Sure. Amazon is the best place to get my book. It's available in 3 different ways. You can get it on ebook if you have a computer or a Kindle. You can get it over ebook immediately. You can also get it on Audible, especially for drivers. If they want to hear it, you can listen to it. And it's not me talking, somebody else did it, but you can hear the book on Audible, and you can order it paperback as well.
And they look for such unfortunates.
That's such unfortunates. Yes. Where that came from, it was I used to go to AA meetings, and in the beginning, they talked about this group of people who were called such unfortunates that could never get this. And I always used to think I was one of them. And so that's where I came up with the title. They were just lost cases. And I always felt I was one of those such unfortunates. And also, if someone wants to connect with me, the best place is probably through Facebook. It's Facebook at Amazing New Book, and that leads you right to my book. And you can send me a message. I will get back to anyone if you want to ask questions about a family member, a friend, or yourself. I will happily get back to you, and with the best advice I can give through my experience to help you out.
Wow. Thank you so much, Andrew. You're a vision of hope for people, because this interview was definitely an eye-opener. I've learned some things. I think that our listeners have too. And for those who need some help, you're giving them a vision that they can, there is a way. And I love the fact that you want to change the way some of these things are done, because that's exactly how we progress and how we can help the people get off these drugs. Oh my gosh, it's just evil what's happening with these substances in people's lives. It's just awful. Thank you so much. We've been speaking with Andrew Mann, the author of Such Unfortunates. Definitely check out his book. It's on drug addiction, and it's a vision of hope, how you can get help and how you can maybe even help some others that you know need some definite help. Reach out and help them. This is the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for the Evening Surge coming up.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. For more information regarding our podcast, reuse, copyrights, etc., please visit our website, www.tncradio.live.